Marcus Brennan had driven this stretch of Interstate 75 1,000 times, maybe more. As a freelance security consultant, the road between Atlanta and Chattanooga had become as familiar as his own driveway. But tonight felt different. The November sky had turned an ominous shade of charcoal, and the first drops of rain were beginning to assault his windshield like tiny bullets. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 4:47 p.m. His daughter Emma's recital started at 6. If traffic cooperated, he'd make it with minutes to spare. At 15, Emma had inherited her mother's musical talent, and missing her cello performance was not an option. Not after he'd already missed her birthday dinner last month because of a job in Nashville. The rain intensified, transforming from drops to sheets in a matter of seconds. Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening as visibility dropped to nearly zero. The wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge. Then came the detour sign, glowing orange through the gray curtain of water. I-75 closed, bridge repairs, follow detour. Perfect, Marcus muttered, taking the exit ramp that led onto County Route 19, a 2-lane road that snaked through the countryside. This would add at least 20 minutes to his journey, maybe more in this weather. The road was deserted, which made sense. Most people had the good sense to wait out storms like this. But Marcus pressed on, checking his phone every few seconds for the GPS to recalculate his arrival time. 6:03, 6:07, 6:12. Emma would understand. She always did. But understanding and disappointment weren't mutually exclusive, and Marcus had seen enough of both in his daughter's eyes over the past 3 years since the divorce. That's when he saw her. At first, it was just a shape on the roadside, dark against the darker treeline. His headlights swept across what looked like a figure standing beside a vehicle. No, not standing. Sitting. In a wheelchair. Marcus's foot moved to the brake instinctively, his heart rate spiking. Someone was stranded out here in a wheelchair, in this storm. Every decent bone in his body told him to stop, but a cautionary voice whispered warnings about scams, about dangerous situations disguised as people in need. He slowed to a crawl, water spraying from his tires. As he drew closer, the scene became clearer. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, sat motionless in a manual wheelchair beside what appeared to be a broken-down sedan. Her head was bowed, rain pouring over her like she was standing under a waterfall. She wasn't waving for help, wasn't trying to flag him down. She just sat there, as if she'd given up entirely. Marcus pulled over, his hazard lights clicking rhythmically. He grabbed the emergency poncho from his backseat and stepped out into the storm. The wind immediately tried to tear the poncho from his hands, and within seconds his jeans were soaked through. "Miss, are you okay?" he shouted over the roar of the rain. She lifted her head slowly, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. Her face was streaked with tears and rain, her dark hair plastered to her skull. But it was her eyes that struck him, deep brown, filled with such profound exhaustion and resignation that it looked like she was staring into another world entirely. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please help me." Her name was Claire Davidson, and her story came out in fragments as Marcus got her into his SUV. The wheelchair folded and stowed in the back. He cranked the heat to maximum, wrapped her in the thermal blanket he kept in his emergency kit, and handed her the coffee from his thermos. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the cup. "How long have you been out there?" Marcus asked, his voice gentle. "Since noon," Claire replied, her teeth chattering. "Maybe longer. I lost track." Marcus checked his watch. It was nearly 5. 5 hours in this weather. "Your car broke down?" Claire's laugh was hollow, broken. "That's not my car. I don't even know whose it is. They left me here." The words hung in the warm air of the vehicle, making no sense at first. "Who left you?" "My cousin and his wife." Claire's voice cracked. "Rebecca and Daniel. They said we were taking a family trip to the mountains." Said it would be good for me to get away after losing Mom. Marcus waited, sensing there was more, that pushing would only make her retreat into herself. Mom died 6 weeks ago, Claire continued, staring at the coffee in her hands. Pancreatic cancer. She went from diagnosis to gone in 3 months. I was her caregiver for the last year. It was just the two of us after the accident. The accident? Drunk driver ran a red light when I was 20. Spinal cord injury. T6 complete. She gestured vaguely at her legs. Mom quit her job to take care of me during recovery. We became a team, her and me against the world. When she got sick, I tried to do the same for her. Claire took a sip of coffee, and Marcus watched as warmth and caffeine started bringing her back to the present. Color was returning to her face, though her eyes still held that 1,000-yard stare. Daniel's my only family left. My mom's nephew, but he's 10 years older than me, so we were never close. He showed up at the funeral with Rebecca, said all the right things. Told me they'd help me sort through Mom's affairs, make sure I was taken care of. I thought. She trailed off, shaking her head. You thought they actually cared, Marcus finished quietly. Mom left me everything in her will. The house, her savings, her life insurance. It wasn't a fortune, maybe $300,000 total, but it was enough. Enough to keep me secure, to pay for the modifications I need, to live independently. Marcus's investigative instincts, honed from years in security consulting and before that, a decade as a fraud investigator for a major insurance company, started piecing together a picture he didn't like. But Daniel expected something. He expected everything. Claire's voice hardened. He told me 2 weeks ago that Mom had promised him the house when she died, that it had been a verbal agreement. He had his lawyer send me papers, demanding I transfer the deed. When I refused, when I showed him the will that clearly left everything to me, he got angry. Really angry. She paused, taking another long sip of coffee. Outside, the rain continued its assault on the vehicle, creating a cocoon of sound that made their conversation feel even more intimate, more isolated from the world. This morning, Daniel called, said he and Rebecca wanted to apologize, wanted to take me on that mountain trip as a peace offering. Rebecca even cried on the phone, said she'd been praying about it and realized they'd been awful to me. I wanted to believe them so badly. I didn't want to be alone anymore. So you went. So I went. Claire's voice was barely a whisper now. They picked me up at 10. We drove for a couple of hours, chatting about nothing important. Then Daniel said he needed to make a quick stop, that he had to drop something off for a friend. He turned onto this road, and a mile later he pulled over. Said the engine was making a weird noise, needed to check it out. Marcus felt his jaw tightening, knowing where this was going. Rebecca said I should get some fresh air while they looked at the engine. It was misting a bit, but not bad yet. They helped me into my chair, positioned me just off the road. I thought it was weird, but I couldn't imagine. They got back in the car and drove away, Marcus said. Claire nodded, tears flowing freely now. Rebecca looked back at me through the rear window. I saw her face. She wasn't upset or conflicted. She was smiling, actually smiling. And then they were gone, and the rain started, and I realized they were going to let me die out here. Marcus made a decision in that moment that would alter the trajectory of multiple lives. He could take Claire directly to the police, file a report, and walk away. It would be the safe choice, the reasonable choice. But as he looked at this young woman who'd been left to die by the only family she had left, he knew he couldn't just walk away. I believe you, he said simply, and I'm going to help you prove what they did. Claire's eyes widened. Why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Because someone needs to. Marcus pulled back onto the road, his mind already working through logistics. And because I've spent 20 years investigating fraud and insurance scams. I know how predators think. I know how they make mistakes. And I promise you, Claire, They made mistakes. He called Emma first, hating the disappointment in her voice when he explained he wouldn't make the recital. But he didn't lie to her. He told her about finding someone who needed help, someone in danger. Emma, mature beyond her years, understood. She always did. "Bring her here, Dad," Emma said. "She can stay in the guest room. Mom's old clothes should fit her." Marcus felt a surge of pride in his daughter. "I love you, kiddo. I'll make this up to you. I know you will. Now go help her." They didn't go to the police that first night. Marcus took Claire to his home in the suburbs of Chattanooga, a modest colonial where he and Emma had moved after the divorce. Emma greeted Claire with immediate warmth. No questions, no judgment. Just a teenage girl showing a traumatized woman to a room, offering her dry clothes, and quietly asking if she liked herbal tea. Marcus's neighbor, Dr. Patricia Reynolds, came over within the hour. As a retired emergency room physician, Patricia took one look at Claire and immediately began a thorough examination. Signs of mild hypothermia, moderate dehydration, but nothing that required hospitalization. Patricia hooked up in 4 in the guest room, monitoring Claire's vitals while Marcus made phone calls. His first call was to an old colleague, Detective Sarah Chun from the Chattanooga Police Department. They'd worked together on several cases over the years, and Marcus trusted her implicitly. "Sarah, I need advice on something, and it's complicated," he began. When he finished explaining the situation, there was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice careful. "Marcus, you know I have to tell you that the proper procedure would have been to bring her straight to the police. I know, but I also know you, and I know you wouldn't have called me if you didn't have good reasons for handling this differently." Another pause. "Here's what I can tell you unofficially. If they file a missing person report first, and they will if this is what she says it is, she's going to look like the unreliable one. A traumatized young woman with a fantastic story about attempted murder versus a concerned cousin who's been frantically searching for her. That's what I thought. You need evidence before you go to the police. Hard evidence. Timestamps, locations, witnesses. Proof that they were nowhere near where they claim to have lost track of her. Can you get that?" "I can get it," Marcus said with certainty. "Give me 3 days." Marcus approached the investigation like he would any major fraud case. Methodically, carefully, and with an understanding that the truth always left traces. People could lie, but data rarely did. He started with Claire's phone, which she'd left in Daniel's car. Using her passwords, Marcus accessed her cloud accounts and found the last location ping. County Route 19, exactly where he'd found her. The timestamp, 12:47 p.m. Next, he checked social media. Daniel and Rebecca had been busy. Their Facebook pages were filled with frantic posts about Claire's disappearance, claiming she'd vanished from a rest stop on I-75 near Dalton. They'd even organized a search party, posted photos of themselves looking distraught and exhausted. But there were problems with their story, little inconsistencies that a casual observer might miss but that screamed falsehood to Marcus's trained eye. In one photo, supposedly taken at 2 p.m. while they were searching frantically, Rebecca was wearing a different outfit than she'd had on in the morning selfie she'd posted earlier. In another, Daniel's supposed search team photo was geotagged at a location 30 miles from where he claimed to be looking. Marcus spent 16 hours that first day building a timeline. He pulled traffic camera footage using his private investigator's license. He tracked Daniel's credit card transactions through contacts at his old insurance company. He called in favors from people who owed him, people who had access to databases and systems that weren't quite public. And slowly a picture emerged. Daniel and Rebecca hadn't driven to I-75 at all. Instead, they'd taken County Route 19, made their stop to abandon Claire, and then driven directly to a motel in Dalton. The credit card receipt showed check-in at 1:23 p.m., 36 minutes after Claire's phone last pinged at the abandonment site. But Marcus needed more. He needed irrefutable proof. On the second day, he drove back to County Route 19, taking Emma with him. His daughter had inherited his analytical mind, and she insisted on helping. "There," Emma pointed as they drove slowly along the route. "That farmhouse has security cameras. See the one pointing at the road?" Marcus pulled into the long driveway, and they were greeted by an elderly man named Walter Grimes, who'd lived on this property for 47 years. "We keep the cameras up after someone tried to steal our tractor a few years back," Walter explained, leading them to his barn where the DVR system was housed. "Recording runs on a loop, keeps about 2 weeks before it overwrites." "Can we see footage from 3 days ago, around noon?" Marcus asked. Walter queued up the footage, and there it was. A silver Honda Accord pulling over on the shoulder. Daniel getting out, helping Claire into her wheelchair. Rebecca standing by the car, checking her phone. And then, after positioning Claire carefully, both of them getting back in the vehicle and driving away, leaving her alone on the roadside. The timestamp was crystal clear, 12:43 p.m. "I'll be damned," Walter muttered. "That's that girl who's been all over the news. The missing one. Can I get a copy of this footage?" Marcus asked, his heart pounding. "You can have whatever you need if it helps find that girl." "We already found her," Emma said quietly. "Now we're making sure the people who tried to kill her don't get away with it." The third day, Marcus and Claire walked into the Chattanooga Police Department with an evidence binder 3 inches thick. Detective Sarah Chun met them in a conference room, and Marcus laid out everything he'd found. Traffic camera footage showing Daniel's car never entered I-75 on the day in question. Credit card receipts placing them at the motel. Security footage from Walter Grimes's farm showing the actual abandonment. Phone records proving Claire's location. Statements from neighbors who'd heard Daniel talking about his inheritance from his aunt weeks before her death. But the strongest evidence came from Rebecca's own device. In tracing their digital footprint, Marcus discovered that Rebecca had searched online the previous week for "How long can someone survive in a wheelchair in the rain?" and "Hypothermia timeline." She'd been so confident in her plan that she'd used her regular phone, not even bothering with incognito mode. Sarah Chun listened to everything, her expression growing darker with each new piece of evidence. When Marcus finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "This is one of the most thoroughly documented attempted murder cases I've ever seen," she said. "And I've seen a lot. Marcus, you know you could have been charged with obstruction for waiting to report this." "I know. Lucky for you, I'm going to conveniently forget about the exact timeline of events." She stood up, gathering the evidence. "I'm getting a warrant right now. Those two are going to be in custody before the sun sets." The arrests happened exactly as Sarah promised. Daniel was taken into custody at his office, surrounded by co-workers who'd seen him on the news crying about his missing cousin. Rebecca was arrested at a yoga class, her designer workout clothes and perfectly manicured nails a stark contrast to the steel handcuffs. The media, which had been covering Claire's disappearance with such sympathy for the devastated family, pivoted immediately. Within hours, the story had transformed from a missing person case to a shocking tale of betrayal and attempted murder. The trial took 8 months to reach court. Daniel and Rebecca hired expensive attorneys who tried every angle, claimed Claire was mentally unstable, suggested she'd orchestrated her own disappearance, argued that the abandonment was a misunderstanding, that they'd meant to come back for her. But Marcus's evidence was ironclad. Every lie they told, he had data to disprove. Every alibi they constructed, he had timestamps to demolish. He sat in the courtroom gallery every single day, a silent presence reminding everyone why they were there. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse of a disabled person. Daniel received 18 years. Rebecca got 15. As the bailiffs led them away, Daniel turned and locked eyes with Marcus. The hatred there was palpable, burning. But Marcus stared back unflinchingly. He'd seen evil before, in insurance scams that destroyed families, in fraud that ruined lives. This was just another flavor of the same poison. The months following the trial were strange for everyone involved. Claire moved into Marcus's guest room with no intention of it being permanent, but somehow permanence happened anyway. She paid rent despite Marcus's protests, contributed to groceries, and slowly began rebuilding a life she'd thought was over. Emma and Claire bonded over music. Claire had played piano before her accident and still could, and she spent hours accompanying Emma's cello practice. Marcus would come home from work to find them in the living room, lost in Dvorak or Bach, creating something beautiful together. Dr. Reynolds became a regular presence, checking on Claire's progress and staying for dinner more often than not. The house that had felt quiet and slightly sad after Marcus's divorce began to fill with life again. Laughter, music, conversation. Marcus found himself looking forward to coming home in a way he hadn't in years. It wasn't just about Claire, though he'd be lying if he said his feelings for her were purely platonic. It was about having a home that felt whole again, a space where people genuinely cared about each other. But he was careful, deliberate. Claire had been through trauma that would take years to process. The last thing she needed was romantic pressure from the man who'd saved her life. So Marcus kept his distance, remained friendly and supportive, and tried to ignore the way his heart skipped when she smiled. It was Claire who finally breached the wall he'd built. 6 months after the trial, on a mild April evening, Marcus was working in the garage on an old motorcycle he'd been restoring. It was his therapy, the one hobby he allowed himself between work and parenting. "I've been thinking." Claire's voice came from the doorway. She'd transferred from her chair to the workbench, watching him work. "Dangerous pastime," Marcus replied with a gentle smile. "I've been thinking about leaving," she continued, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. "I got the insurance settlement from Mom's estate. The house sold last month. I have enough money to buy my own place, hire care if I need it, start fresh somewhere." Marcus forced his voice to remain neutral. "That sounds good. You deserve a fresh start." "It does sound good, doesn't it?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "So why can't I make myself do it?" Marcus set down his wrench and looked at her directly. "You don't owe us anything, Claire. If you want to stay, you stay because you want to, not because you feel obligated." "That's the thing," she said softly. "I do want to stay. This house, this family. It's the first place I've felt like I belonged since before Mom got sick. Emma treats me like a big sister. Dr. Reynolds has become like an aunt. And you." She trailed off and Marcus held his breath. "You make me feel safe," Claire finished. "And seen. And like I'm not defined by this chair or by what happened to me. You see me." Marcus moved closer, crouching so they were eye level. "I do see you. I see someone incredibly strong. Someone who survived something that would have broken most people. Someone who brings light into this house just by being in it." "Marcus, I need to know something." Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "Am I imagining this? This thing between us? Because if I am, please tell me now so I can start looking for my own place and we can forget I said anything." "You're not imagining it," Marcus said, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "But Claire, I saved your life. There's a power dynamic there that makes this complicated. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything, including your feelings." "I don't owe you," Claire said firmly. "But I do feel for you. I think I have since that second week, when you spent 16 hours finding evidence to save me and then came home and still made sure Emma got help with her algebra homework. When you balance being a protector and a father and a genuinely kind human being. That's when I knew." Marcus couldn't help himself. He leaned forward and kissed her, soft and careful and full of months of restrained feeling. When they pulled apart, Claire was smiling, really smiling for the first time since he'd known her. "So I'm staying," she said. "Good," Marcus replied. Because this house would be too quiet without you. A year later, Marcus stood in his backyard watching his daughter and Claire laugh together over something on Claire's phone. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold, and he felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened him. Emma was 16 now, confident and thriving in a way she hadn't been before Claire entered their lives. She'd found in Claire a role model who showed her that strength came in many forms, that adversity could be overcome, that family wasn't always defined by blood. Claire had started a nonprofit called Second Chances, working with disabled individuals who'd been taken advantage of by family members. She'd become a fierce advocate, using her story to help others find their voices. Marcus helped with investigations, tracking down fraud and abuse cases, using his skills for something that felt meaningful. They hadn't talked about marriage or long-term plans. They didn't need to. Some things were simply understood, built on a foundation of trust and genuine affection that needed no formal declaration. Dr. Reynolds came around the corner carrying a pitcher of lemonade, followed by Emma's boyfriend Tyler and Claire's new assistant Lisa. The backyard had become a gathering place, a symbol of how much their lives had expanded and healed. "You're doing that thing again," Emma called to her father. "That standing there being philosophical thing." "Just appreciating the moment," Marcus called back. "Sappy," Emma declared, but she was grinning. Claire wheeled over to where Marcus stood. "She's right, you know. You're getting soft in your old age." "Old age? I'm 43. Ancient," Claire teased. Then, more seriously, "But really, what are you thinking about?" Marcus considered the question. "About how random moments can change everything. If I'd taken a different route that day, if I'd driven past, if I'd talked myself out of stopping, everything would be different." "But you didn't," Claire said simply. "You stopped. You chose compassion over convenience. You chose to see someone who needed help and actually help them. That's not random, Marcus. That's character." "Maybe we all saved each other," Marcus suggested. "You gave me and Emma a purpose again. Gave us a reason to be more than just surviving." Claire reached for his hand. "Then we're even." They stood like that for a while, watching their found family gather in the golden afternoon light. Emma was teaching Tyler a new piece on the cello, the music floating across the yard. Dr. Reynolds was telling Lisa some outrageous story from her ER days, both of them laughing. That evening, after everyone had gone home and Emma was upstairs doing homework, Marcus and Claire sat on the back porch. The fireflies were starting to emerge, blinking their mysterious signals in the gathering dark. "I got a letter today," Claire said. "From Rebecca." Marcus felt his body tense. "What did it say?" "She wants me to visit her in prison. Says she's found God, that she wants to apologize in person, to make amends." Claire's voice was carefully neutral. "Are you going to go?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to hear her say the words, admit what she did. But another part of me knows that it wouldn't change anything. She didn't find God. She found a parole board in her future. Whatever you decide, I'll support you," Marcus said. "I know you will." Claire squeezed his hand. "That's why I love you." It was the first time either of them had said it out loud, though they'd both felt it for months. The words hung in the warm evening air, simple and true. "I love you too," Marcus replied. "Though I should probably warn you that Emma's been dropping hints about wanting you to officially become her stepmom." Claire laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Has she now?" "Increasingly unsubtle ones. Last week she asked me if I still had my grandmother's ring." "And do you?" "I do. It's a simple band, nothing fancy. But it was worn by a woman who loved fiercely and protected her family fearlessly. Seems appropriate." Claire turned to look at him, her eyes shining in the porch light. "Marcus Brennan, are you proposing to me?" "Not yet," Marcus said with a soft smile. "When I propose, it's going to be memorable. But I'm letting you know that I'm thinking about it." that I want a future with you, that you're not just the woman I rescued on County Route 19. You're the woman I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life. That's pretty close to a proposal, Claire pointed out, tears streaming down her face. Consider it a preview. The actual proposal will be better. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of suburban Tennessee. Somewhere down the street, children were playing a late game of kickball. A dog barked. Car drove past. Life ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Marcus, Claire said softly. Yeah. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for not driving past. Marcus pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I would stop 1,000 times. I would choose you 1,000 times. You're worth stopping for, Claire. You always were. And sitting there on that porch with the woman he loved beside him and his daughter safe upstairs, Marcus understood something profound. Heroism wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was about showing up, about choosing compassion when it would be easier to look away, about seeing someone in need and refusing to be the person who drives past. He'd stopped on County Route 19 expecting to help a stranger. Instead, he'd found a family, found a purpose, found a love that was deeper and more real than anything he'd imagined possible. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage aren't about what you fight against. They're about what you choose to fight for. And on that rainy November day, Marcus had chosen to fight for someone he didn't even know, someone who had no claim on him except the universal human obligation we all share to help each other survive. That choice had changed 3 lives forever. And as he sat there with Claire, with the sound of Emma's music drifting down from upstairs, Marcus knew he'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Because some people are worth stopping for. And some stops change everything. If the story reminded you that one act of kindness can ripple outward in ways you never imagine, that courage sometimes looks like simply stopping when everyone else drives past, and that found families can be just as powerful as those we're born into, then remember, you have the power to be someone's Marcus. You have the power to be the person who stops. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to hear more tales of compassion, courage, and the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people choose to help.